Potter Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to acknowledge the work of the Select Committee and the SOP put up by my colleague Claire Curran, and acknowledge that that has wide support, and happy to support that. I'm going to confine my discussions to section 4 and a little bit of section 5, but in particular, Mr. Chairman, I want to look at in section 4, clause 7, which looks at recovery activity. And I just want to quote from the bill that recovery activity is defined as the assessment of ongoing monitoring of needs of the community affected by an emergency. It's the coordination and integration of planning decisions, actions and resources. It's about the regeneration, restoration and enhancement of communities, the cultural, physical well-being of individuals and their communities, the government and non-government organisations and entities working together to reduce risks from hazards and to build resilience. And in this regard, I want to actually quote from the work, the activity that happened in the community of Aranui as an example of how a community deals with a situation and how it actually works to build that resilience into a community for later disasters. So what happened in Aranui in the February earthquakes was it was a community that was largely cut off from the rest of the city because it was unable to, there was poor communication in and out of Aranui. Of course, the roads were fairly damaged, and for a few weeks, the community there had limited access to water and no access to functioning toilets. So as a community, it's one of our lower socioeconomic communities. What they did as a community group was they decided to door knock every single house in that community and talk to the people there, find out who was living there, who had mobility issues, who had health concerns, where there were children. So every house was mapped in that community. And what they did was they ensured that those that needed to be prioritised were prioritised. And as communication was fairly limited, they ensured that the resources went to those that needed it first. There were organisations, and I happened to work for one of them, who at that time opened their doors to ensure that there was a hot meal prepared for people at lunchtime, that they could have access to showers and they could do their washing. Simple things that actually meant that a community could continue to function, even in a limited capacity, through those times when it was difficult to get even the basic services through. Now, what that did for that particular community of Aranui was it actually set within them the opportunity to ensure that their community wasn't going to be affected in the same way again. So every year they continue to do that door-to-door mapping of the community. They find out who is living, who has the health concerns, who is elderly, what kind of support they might need, and they have actually, through their own fundraising, put together a container that has generators, that has supplies in it, that has blankets. It has enough supplies to keep that community going for a few weeks should they be cut off again. Now, that is at the heart of what this section 4 talks about, building resilience. That community has done it on its own. It should be something that, as communities across the country, we actually use as a model. These people realise that in order to get through a significant event, you have to take some measures yourself. So they have done it themselves, and I want to commend them for doing that. But like my colleague, Dr. Megan Woods, actually want to also question why in the submission from the CDHB, the ability to have within the definitions of those key roles, we haven't included the health response and recovery manager, because as my colleague said, this is a significant role within the civil defence roles and responsibilities, and it is something that I think the Minister perhaps could answer why that wasn't considered. It's a very good submission by the CDHB, and it certainly is a vital role that should have a place within the civil defence emergency management profile. Thank you, Mr. Chair.